Welcome to the March 21st IAC meeting. I'm going to do a quick roll call vote. James,
Here.
Lisa,
Here.
thank you. Long,
Here.
Beth,
Here.
Kari.
I'm here.
Great, thank you all. So oversight's a little more complicated because most other programs in the county just report up that chain, but most public matching programs don't actually report directly to the elected officials who run the municipality, whether it be the city, the county, the state, etc. And that's because there's always a concern about conflict of interest in these programs. What does it mean when a candidate is, or a person, an elected official is both overseeing the program and also running under the program at the same time? And their positions, their jobs depend on whether or not they win or their opponent wins, which ultimately is really impacted by the matching program. So there's always a concern about conflict of interest with these, with these dynamics. And I'm not saying that anyone on the current board or any elected official right now would act improperly. I'm just pointing out that this is a common concern that happens in most other localities too. And we have to, consider best practices when passing recommendations. So what most oversight commission, or what most matching programs do is they actually report to an oversight commission. And the oversight commission is, typically made up of volunteers who are not tied to any of the elected officials or the campaigns. And those oversight commission members can act in an unbiased way and can be like a referee to call the elections or to, make decisions about the elections. And so that is why the subcommittee recommended going with an oversight commission. And I think we'll just talk about that real briefly. The Oversight Commission would have 9 members on it, and they would serve for 2 4-year terms. This is actually identical to what Portland does. They have their Portland Elections Commission also has 9 members who serve 2 4-year terms. So 9 members serving 2 4-year terms. In this case, the Oversight Commission members would be appointed, would be nominated, each by a different elected official, except for 2 who would be nominated by the Oversight Commission itself. So it's important to point out that in the charter, it's pretty clear that the chair and the board have final authority over the actual vote on who gets to serve or who serves on these Oversight Commissions. If you mind just holding on a second for questions, I'll get to a natural stopping point. But and so the chair and the board still have the right to have that final vote, but who nominates the members is we have a lot more flexibility there. And so the subcommittee recommended that every one of the elected officials, meaning the 4 members of the board, the chair, the auditor, and the sheriff, each gets to nominate 1 member. And then because there are 9 members, but there's only 7 elected officials, the final 2 members would be nominated by the Oversight Commission itself. These are just nominations, and they would go to the full board, and the full board would evaluate the candidates and decide to vote on them and how to vote too. So, but the nominations would every stakeholder in this situation would get a different nomination is the goal. And also the when there's a vacancy, the members potential members can apply through a public process, and the Oversight Commission would then in conjunction with the staff review all the applications and develop a short list. And so they may, let's say 100 people applied for the position, which I don't think that's ever going to happen, but if we ever get 100 people applying, the staff and the oversight commission may narrow that down to say 15 or 10, like a manageable number, and then they would give that list over to whoever has the nomination. So, you know, if it's the chair's opportunity to nominate someone, the staff would give them a list of 10 to 15 individuals, and the chair would choose from there who they want to nominate, and then the board would vote on that. So that would be the process for filling vacancies. I'm going to pause for a second before going any further. Are there any questions so far? Yeah, I think James, you want to go first because I know you raised it. Okay, Felisa, then go ahead.
I just had two questions. One question is, does the county elections currently have like a committee or a board that they work with?
I don't believe they do.
Okay, and then my second thing is as a comment. My second thing is a comment, which would be, I think it would be good to have an intergovernmental agreement or encourage an intergovernmental agreement so that the oversight commission of the city and the county can work together.
Do you mean work together like on specific topics, or like work, or just like be the same commission?
I don't think they need to be the same commission, but I feel like if we're really looking for sort of consistency and you have two commissions, it would be good, like if a couple of times, at least once a year or something, or before an election, they got together to talk about what the sort of rules were going to be, that there was some coordination between the two of them.
Okay. Any thoughts on that suggestion?
I really like that. I mean, I think it's hard to be binding, but I think we're making recommendations here. We could say whatever we want. So I think that I agree with Felisa. Like, it would be good to basically state that the election commission or whatever should meet with the Portland Election Commission at least annually to discuss opportunities for overlap and standardization. My comments, so I think this is really great work. I don't remember who was on the subcommittee that produced this, but thank you, Long. It looks really good. The parts that I had, I think having the sheriff and the auditor, nominate feels a little weird. I mean, I understand they're like county-wide elected officials, but they just feel so much different than the county chair and the other county commissioners. So that part was like a little weird to me. And then the one other thing that I think does need a little bit of work is under C, who's prohibited from serving on the Oversight Commission. The first one, current elected officials, feels overly broad. I don't know who we're kind of picturing excluding there, but in my mind, like, being on the PCC school board should not preclude you from, being on this committee if you want. Like, maybe there are some offices. I mean, definitely, I know we already handle all the county elected officials, but maybe there are some other ones that we want to exclude too. I mean, it's impossible for me to imagine anyone who's currently a City of Portland commissioner, also wanting to serve on this random board, but like, maybe they should be excluded. But like, I don't know, other people, there's a lot of little districts around here. If you're on the Soil and Water Conservation District and you also want to serve on this board, it seems weird for us to say, nah, can't do that.
Do you mind? I definitely hear that, but do you mind if we actually like hold on that comment? Because I want to make sure we move through this section by section. And the first section was about.
I'm so sorry. This was only section A feedback. My bad.
No worries. I didn't say that up front. I should have. But so I think the first part is how are members, how many members are on the commission? How do people get appointed on the commission? I did hear from James. Your first point was, should the auditor and sheriff be able to appoint or nominate a person to serve on this? I think the thinking was that, they are also stakeholders in this conversation. They are impacted by the policies because they are the ones who run under it. And so that was the reason why, I think that was the thinking for why they should be included in that process. Before I jump on to other questions, Lung and Kezia, I know that you both served on the on this subcommittee. If you want to add anything, by all means.
Yeah, I remember this conversation because I asked you a question, and I remember asking like, is it an issue if the auditor and the sheriff are like excluded from nominating, and then all the other like county commissioners like have like two, and then I think the discussion went something along the lines of like, there is like tensions if someone feels like they're excluded from like the discussion, especially if they are a stakeholder. So I think it was better. It's more of like a safe or sorry type of thing. But we just wanted to bring up like all of our data to the full IAC because I think we weren't sure on that point.
Other thoughts on letting the auditor and sheriff nominate a member to the Oversight Commission?
Well, real quick, you said model in the city of Portland. Does the auditor in Portland nominate someone to the Oversight Commission?
No, actually, in Portland, it's a little different. In Portland, I don't think the individual members of the council got their own designated appointees. I think, people could certainly offer suggestions. But ultimately, I think there was no like specific designation for elected officials on that one.
It occurs to me that if it were just the 4 county commissioners and the chair, that's 5. If those people then were to pick 4 for a total of 9, what you'd have is a situation where you have 5 people who are sort of associated with members and 4 who are one step removed. And so either if there's a disagreement, right, between people who are current elected officials and they're not representatives, but they're going to be friendly with, they're going to be aligned with potentially, they could all 5 vote together to overrule the 4. Or if one is in a different position and the 4 independent ones, that's a majority of 5. And that seems to me like the right kind of power dynamic, as opposed to 7 come from elected officials and 2 are independent.
So in this case, 5 come from elected officials, and sorry, where the other 4 come from?
And those 5 picked the last 4.
Oh, interesting.
Just like you have right now, the 7 picked the 2. But in this case, 5 would pick 4.
I'm sorry, just to understand, are you saying that the 5 nominees from the elected officials pick the other 4, or you mean like
that's what you have there now, right? The first 7 pick the next 2, right?
It's a little different than that. I think there's 2 things going on. One, how do we comprise the initial board of 9? But then I think thinking ahead to 2 years or 4 years or whatever, how is then the 9 people impaneled when there is already a board, right? And so I'm kind of with Kari of like, I mean, in general, trying to insulate it a little bit from people feeling like, hey, I'm here on behalf of the chair who nominated me, like the more we can get away from that, like the better it is. But I do understand that the county commission, the county board has a really important role in this. So like, I like Kari's kind of idea of like 5 people are nominated by, the chair and the 4 county commissioners, and the other 4 are nominated by the existing board. We'll have to figure out how we do the first one when there is no existing board, but like that makes sense to me. And I think like that balance of like roughly half, nominated by elected officials and half nominated by the existing committee tries to keep it like independent.
I will once again acknowledge of my great instinct to always over-engineer problems. So I'll look to Kezia and Long to tell me that's absurd.
I don't think it's absurd. I think it makes sense, and I think that it then allows for there to be some ownership of the existing committee when they're nominating individuals. So I feel like it preserves that. So I think it does make sense, Kari.
Okay.
And so in this scenario, because we might have already said this, I just want to clarify for everyone. Remember the chair and the board have a charter protected right to be the ones who actually vote on these members. So they would appoint 5 of the members, and then those members would then nominate the other 4, who then the chair on the board would also vote on.
Right. Yeah, and this first 5 essentially serve as a quorum of 9, and there's 4 vacancies. I think you go through your vacancy process.
If the 5 members of the board are nominating 5 of the members of the oversight commission, does each board member get one nomination, or do they just kind of like all get one together? How does that work?
What you've got here for vacancies is the county takes applications, the current commission develops a short list, and they nominate, and then they push that forward to the county board. Oh, I'm sorry, you got in here, the PCF staff will develop a short list.
Yeah, the PCF staff would work with the oversight commission to develop that short list. And the original, and the proposal you're looking at now, they would then give that short list over to whichever board member or elected official is designated to nominate. So if it's the chair's turn to nominate, the chair gets a short list and gets to pick from the list.
If the vacancy is is the chair's original designee, and so what would you do with the ones that are? Let's see.
Felisa.
I feel like this is a little bit confusing. Can you kind of recap where we're at?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm also kind of sick, so I'm maybe having a hard time tracking.
No problem. So the proposal has been amended, and the amendment would say that, each of the 5 members of the county board, the chair and the 4 commissioners, nominate a member to serve on the oversight commission. So that would bring 5 members onto the oversight commission. Then those 5 members pick the next 4 from the list, from the list of applicants. And then they bring those nominations to the full county board, and the full county board votes on those nominations. So 5 of them are picked out directly from the commissioners or the chair, and then 4 of them are really nominated by the existing members of the oversight commission.
Yes, that's my amendment.
Thank you for the recap.
And so my other question, the only question remaining is, if in the first step of this is the 5 members are picking, the 5 members of the board are picking 5 members of the oversight commission, does each member of the board get a designated nominee, or is that not the case in just the full board? Just nomination and votes.
I am partial to the nominates and votes. I feel like, if you're gonna just give people designated spots, then why not just have them automatically appoint people, as opposed to nominates and vote, and then the commission votes.
Beth.
I agree. And just a quick clarifier in this amendment it'd be the 5 people would be appointed, and then they would go through the process of filling the 4 spots. It wouldn't be like as it's written here, where the previous oversight committee appoints the 2 or 4 in this scenario.
It's not the previous one in this case. It's the 5 members who are appointed and voted on already by the board. They're essentially picking the 4 of their colleagues to serve with.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that I was clear on that part. I think that sounds good to me. I do fear it could be slightly confusing to both people who are applying or wanting to be on the oversight committee. I don't know, if I was throwing my hat in the ring, I'd be like, okay, if I wasn't one of the first 5, am I still eligible? Do I have to reapply? Those are obviously things that is not necessarily part of our recommendation that they'll have to figure out afterwards. But that is just maybe a concern that it might be a little confusing. I think that it could also be explained in a time when I'm not as tired as I am right now, and I would probably understand a little better.
I think James, I saw your question. Your hand was raised.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for Beth's question actually, because it made me realize I was misunderstanding this, and I want to just ask, I guess, the committee. I was picturing that some of these seats would roll off at different times, but actually, as just kind of re-described, it's like all 9 get nominated and approved at the same time, which is why you need like the 5 to do the 4. I was kind of picturing it more like there would be an existing committee, obviously not for the first time, but like then some of the members would term out, while other members were still there, and the existing committee would kind of pick the 4. But that does require then us to like think about how we would stagger it, which I mean, I think there's reasons to stagger it as opposed to like having all 9 people start and stop at the same time.
Yeah. Felisa.
I feel like I agree on the staggering in a huge way. I don't think you want to turn over a whole commission at once. That's a terrible idea. I think one of the ways you could just stagger it is that by who gets to nominate and when. So the county commission seats are staggered. So if you're not up, so you would stagger it so that if you're not up for re-election, then your nominations are the ones that go forward. And then you're not nominating in an election year, you're nominating in off years, and that creates automatic staggering.
Okay, that's really intriguing. So I'm going to capture that right now on the notes. BOCC nominates 5, but cannot be nominated, or but cannot nominate is up for election, creates a staggered process or staggered series of terms.
And
Great.
terms on the board could just match the county commission terms too, so you wouldn't really have to. It would be easier to keep track of.
Yeah, that would be. Any thoughts on that proposal?
I like it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to just summarize it. Also, Roxana just joined us, and she was a member of this subcommittee, so I want to definitely make sure we're all on the same page. So moving away from each elected official gets to nominate 1, and then 2 are nominated from the Oversight Commission. We're scrapping that. We're replacing it with, the Board of County Commissioners, all 5 of those members, would pick 5 members. But they would not be able, but like a member would not be able to nominate someone if they were up for election in that cycle. And then those, the 5 the board members would vote on those 5 individuals. And that we have the first 5 of the Oversight Commission. Then those 5 of the Oversight Commission would nominate the remaining 4, who would be voted on by the board. And that how we get to 9, and the 9 would be like in staggered terms. So that's where we are so far. Okay, great. Let's talk about the next step, which is restrictions on who can serve. And so the goal behind this is that, we want to create an accessible option. We want everyone to be able to, bring their different perspectives, and want it to be an open process. However, it's important to note that there is a history in other communities of elected officials trying to stack the Oversight Commission with their allies, and then putting pressure on those allies to vote in a way that benefits the elected official. So restrictions help ensure that we have a group of unbiased people serving on the Oversight Commission, or at least unbiased as is possible. So that is where the list of restrictions come from. I'll just run through it real quickly. I mean, I sent that video out, so I'm not going to explain each one, but I'm just going to run through them all, and then you all can discuss So that would include the people restricted from serving would be current elected officials, campaign staff, campaign consultants, or campaign contractors who are volunteering with or paid by a candidate running for county office, any employee of Multnomah County, any individual employed by or serving on the board of an organization that has received contracts within the county for the previous year, any individual employed by or serving on the board of an organization that engages in electoral advocacy for candidates running for county office, immediate family members of candidates for county office or current elected officials, or county elected officials, any individuals who have violated campaign finance or public ethics law, and that one just needs a little bit more refinement, and former county elected officials or their county or their direct county staff within the last 5 to 7 years. So that is the full list of restrictions. With that being said, what do folks feeling like? What are what are your reactions to that? James.
Well, Kari started going. Go ahead, Kari.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I agree with James on current elected officials is too broad, right? Like certainly not anybody who's elected at the county, obviously. But yeah, soil and water conservation people, whatever. I suppose you could say any I believe the Oregon Constitution calls them lucrative office. You're barred from holding 2 lucrative offices under the Oregon Constitution, and that is any position that makes money. So, which is why you can be in the legislature and on your school board, because the school board doesn't make any money. But you can't be on the Portland City Council and legislature at the same time, because they both make money.
I would have to look up.
There's an Oregon state legislature, the county commissions, the Portland City Council. That's about it.
I would have to look up whether
Metro.
does lucrative include stipends, because we don't pay members of the oversight commission, but we do give stipends. So
No, I meant elected officials who are in lucrative offices, to be clear.
I think
Okay.
it should be salaried, maybe is the term. Lucrative is a real misnomer.
Yes. It's an old timey term.
who are salaried. Great.
In 1893, $40,000 a year was real lucrative.
Okay.
I think that, I mean, I don't, if there is such a term that we can leverage, I feel like that seems right, like maybe city, state elected office, metro, obviously the county, like maybe those are the right ones.
Yeah, maybe we should list them. Don't get all complicated. We should list them.
Oh, okay. Current elected officials from the county, city, state.
Legislature.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was any state official. Yeah.
Yeah, state office,
Metro.
That state treasurer don't want to be in there.
yeah. Okay, so I think I like that a lot if we just list those handful of offices. The other thoughts that I had on this section, under the second bullet, campaign staff, I think we also need to say candidates for county office, which I don't think is captured under any of the bullets right now.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. I think we meant to capture that and just got overlooked.
Unless you're an immediate family member of yourself.
I mean, maybe you meant that under, I mean, there is one that deals with county electeds. Maybe that should include candidates, or we should include candidates with the campaign staff or whatever. But I
could just put it there in bullet number 2, county candidates or candidates for county office.
It's actually bullet 6, I think, where you want to put it. Candidates for office and their immediate family members.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, yep, totally.
Okay, we can at least move it there so that way it's a little clearer. But okay. We have like the highlighted things we do want to, the subcommittee wanted to discuss with the full committee, but before we go into the highlighted things, other reactions to this list. Beth.
I mean, this is one of the bullet points with the highlighted things, but I think that was that fourth bullet point around being employed by an organization that receives contracts. Does that include grants from the county as well? I assume it does.
Yeah, it would include grants.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many nonprofits in Multnomah County that do receive grants, and there's lots of people who might work for nonprofits who might want to run on the oversight committee. So part of me is kind of like, are we not allowing a lot of people who might be really good on this committee to not serve because they work for an organization that gets a grant? I like completely understand the thought process behind that, and I can see like why y'all recommended it, but for some, in my mind, it's not completely sticking right now, or there's just something a little that's like off about it to me in this moment. But yeah.
Okay. And I can just summarize for people, I think the idea was, there's folks whose jobs depend on county contracts, and they're serving on the oversight commission. Are they going to feel pressured to vote a certain way to help like an elected official stay in office and keep the contract going? But Beth, you make a good point. A lot of community-based nonprofits certainly get these grants, and that would exclude a lot of people. Felisa?
Why don't you do it as a percentage of funds? So if over 80% of your funds come from the Multnomah County, or the other thing is, I feel like we're sort of not going to be able to like for every single scenario under this, and county contracts is really broad. So I think there's also ethics guidelines around that if you sit on boards and commissions, and I assume those ethics guidelines apply. So
Yes, there are ethics guidelines, and it is, guidance around conflict of interest. You're supposed to recuse yourself, vote if there's a conflict of interest. Do people want to keep that and make a percentage, or do people just want to get rid of that bullet point?
I would say that one and the next one, engage in electoral advocacy, which is extremely fuzzy, could be extensive timelines. I would say both of those could be wiped out, and we just rely on the existing ethics rules around, conflicts of interest.
I do have a concern about removing the next bullet point. Before we move on, just about the contracts. Do people just want me to get rid of that bullet point, or do people want to amend it?
I guess I feel a little, it doesn't seem great if, it's unclear to me. I don't think this actually falls into like a government ethics thing, but if you serve if you're part of a nonprofit or something that gets the majority of your funding from the county, like, I don't know, it does feel like you might, be hard pressed to vote against, it's on something that's going to make the current county commission unhappy with you. I do think it can't be what we have there, because that excludes way too many people who might, be getting like a very small, insignificant amount of money from the county from serving.
Or may not even know that their organization has a contract because they're in a large organization.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. You work at Portland State. Is there a contract somewhere at Portland State with the county?
Right. Yeah, totally. Right. And also that contract has zero, material effect on your decisions. Right. Totally.
James, are you advocating that for like a minimum percentage?
I think that, I appreciate Felisa's suggestion. I think there's like maybe some problems with that, but I can't really think of a better way to do it. I do think what we're trying to get at is like, is the money you're getting from the county distractingly large to like make you not be able to feel independent? And distractingly large is going to be at a different number for different people. So it's like hard to exactly capture, but I don't know. Beth, what do you think is reasonable in terms of a amount of money to be getting from the county, but still feel like you can take an independent vote?
Yeah, I don't know. That's really tough because you're right. Because if you're working at a nonprofit, right? I work at Unite Oregon. There might be some people at Unite Oregon who has one job, one project, and all of that is funded by one grant that might come from the county. Now that person is obviously going to be swayed very heavily if their entire salary is from the county. Whereas myself, none of my salary comes from the county. So like, even though my organization probably gets money from it, I personally am not the recipient of any of those grants. So I don't know if there's a way that maybe we could phrase it more so like that, where, but that also might be really difficult, especially if people are just, yeah, sorry, I'm very tired. My brain is very fuzzy right now, so I'm not explaining things well. But I don't know what that percentage is because it's really difficult to know how different organizations are running their finances. I agree that like we shouldn't get. I'd have to read the ethics, everything to know if we should or should not get rid of it completely. But Felisa, I think you might have better insight in all this than I do. So
I just want to jump in. I feel like the Oregon Government Ethics Commission has a standard for other boards that basically outlines like if it's 100% of your salary comes from county funds or state funds or something like that, then you can't sit on a board. Or if 100% of your funds come, I know I sit on a board or sat on a board that was like if 100% of your funds come, if your income comes from the healthcare industry, then you couldn't serve in certain board seats. So saying it that way, as opposed to like, are you employed by the kid? Like if your income is tied, 100% of your income is tied to the county, then you can't serve on the board. And that is a very clear piece as opposed to does your organization get a county grant? The other piece I'd like to throw in here is this, any previous, or we can talk about that, but I also want to talk about any previous violators of campaign finance or public ethic laws. To me is just completely unacceptable. Like, I do feel like people violate campaign finance laws all the time, maybe not intentionally. And I also don't think we can have restorative justice. Like the county can't be an advocate for restorative justice and then be like, you've made a mistake and now you're fucking permanently banned from ever sitting on a board. Like, come on.
Okay. James?
So if I'm responding to the first part of Felisa's statement or comments, but I do want to talk. I'm sure everybody wants to talk more substantively about the second part. But if we can, I don't know, task you, Daniel, to do some research on if the Oregon Government Ethics Commission already has some language that we can lean on, that seems like a really good solution there. If not, I do feel like maybe we could say something that's more like, you know, as part of the application process, commissioners have to, you know, divulge if, you know, they have a potential conflict of interest, and that, you know, like should be taken into account with, you know, the decision to nominate them or not, something like that, where it's more kind of like on the individual to like report it, and they're not to be selected if they do have, you know, like a material conflict.
Okay. I'm gonna take that point out, and there's kind of like a little list I have of like things you all ask me to research. I'm gonna bring it to you, so that way you can like pass the overall policy. If I can come back and be like, here's some amendments. Let's talk about these amendments later on, so that we can keep on like, the timetable we have. So I can remove this point and then look into that Oregon Government Ethics Commission language. Okay, moving on to the next one. Any individual employed by or serving on a board of an organization that engages in electoral advocacy for candidates running for county office. The city actually does have a similar, you know, I think it does have similar language. And I think the idea is like, it would potentially look really bad if there's an oversight commission that's making calls on, election choices, and members of the oversight commission like sat on organizations that were actively working for a candidate running for office. So I think that's like what the goal, or county run office. So that was like the goal of what that point was about.
You've already got campaign staff, campaign consultants, and campaign contractors up above, and I agree with that one. That's fine, of course. I think engages in electoral advocacy. The challenge here is it's, I think, overly broad. If you work at Latino Network, it's entirely possible. It's a large organization, right? 150 employees, and you're busily over here trying to like help pregnant teen moms or something. Meanwhile, over in the other office over here, they've endorsed a county candidate. Is endorsing somebody engaging electoral advocacy? Yeah. Should it bar them from this? No. So I would say it's got to be something like primarily engaged in, electoral advocacy. I still want to understand what electoral advocacy means, but it seems to me like it should be this is a campaign organization, right? I mean, SEIU engages in electoral advocacy, right? And Felicia shouldn't be barred from this, right? Like there are lots of organizations that endorse candidates.
Also on that.
I think also, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I think that this also gets to Kari's. Like, you recuse yourself from things that have direct impact. Like, you have to, I actually think one of the challenges with the city of Portland is actually it doesn't have a lot of people on it who do the sort of day-to-day campaign work. And so they rely on people showing up and talking to them about it, but not a lot of actual campaign people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do people want me to?
Again, Oregon government ethics matters here, right? Again, that's saying that structure, we have an existing structure for conflicts.
Do people want me to remove that bullet point, and we can just have language that emphasizes, if you have a conflict of interest, you must recuse yourself, and you must divulge it in your application. Okay. And we'll get that. And is that also the same for the previous one? Like we just talked about the salary and grants. Do people want me to continue research on that, or do you also want me to just remove it and say like that same language we just talked about?
Same.
About like recusal. What?
Yeah, same thing. Recusal and disclosure.
Okay. Okay. And then we also have immediate family members of candidates for county office, current county elected officials. I think this was brought up earlier. Any individual who's violated campaign finance law or public ethics law, within a certain time frame. I think the thinking behind here was, a person is like repeatedly violating the rules over and over again. Should they be allowed to serve on the oversight commission? But Felicia made your point too, which I thought was really thoughtful. And so, Beth, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
You can go ahead, Felicia.
I also just want to say these people do actually have to get appointed. So if you're like a mass violator of campaign finance laws, hopefully the county commission will have the God-given sense not to appoint you.
True. Beth, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Felicia. I'm wondering if we also might want to add here uncured campaign finance violations. I don't know if that's just inherently part of it, but if somebody, makes an honest mistakes, violates stuff, then they cure it. I don't think that they should be, I guess if it's cured, then it isn't a violation. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're hearing two different things. One is, should we just update it to say uncured? And the other one is should we just remove that entirely and just, entrust the board to not appoint people who are serial violators of the law? So those are the two conversations we're having right now. Do folks have a preference?
To Felicia's point earlier, I think I'm more so on the side of getting rid of it. I think that we have to trust that if people do have a lot of violations, they're not going to be appointed. And if they are appointed, then they would have had to show like some growth in that area. And like, you know, it's more on that restorative justice piece and not so much of like holding people to mistakes or whatever that they may have made 20 years ago.
Okay.
But happy to hear other thoughts too.
Yeah, Kari?
Yeah, I think if we're going to define it, I would want to define it more narrowly as you've been convicted of. I think the worst stuff that happens in Oregon campaign finance law is a Class C felony. Punishable by imprisonment and fines. Maybe that's a benchmark, but I do agree with Felisa. Like that guy is not going to get appointed, no matter how many times they apply. So like, moreover, like what if you were, there's some scandal and you were involved in a campaign finance crime in another state? Maybe it's not a felony there, but it's still scandalous. Again, bright lines here are not necessarily helpful when you then have a nomination and confirmation process that's going to clear all that up.
Okay. I'm hearing that there's, it seems like there's energy behind removing this bullet point. Okay.
Sorry, I had a work phone call, so I missed a little bit of it. But I mean, to Kari's last point, if we're gonna take it out because Kari thinks it's gonna be screened out.
Felisa's point.
Okay, that's fine. But I mean, if the point that Kari was just communicating that like, oh, it's going to be handled as part of the confirmation process, then I think it's really important that we require on the application at the front end that people report, because it is not the case that with these random county boards that they're doing a deep Google search for everything. There have been a lot of scandals that we've had with people making it, all the way through. So the onus should be on the applicant to divulge then if they've had any, campaign finance like problems in the past, citations or other issues in the past, so that can be considered as part of their appointment if we're going to take it out of the requirements.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to run that by the attorney's office, because I think I know there are rules around asking about criminal justice backgrounds, on applications. And so I'll just have to make sure that
it's
what
for
you said?
jobs.
This
It's for
civil.
jobs. It's not a job. It's a privilege to serve on a board. So it's not the same.
Okay. All right. Well, now we'll remove this bullet point. And then finally, former county elected officials or their direct county staff within the last 5 to 7 years. Yeah, Felisa.
I was curious why the committee picked 5 to 7. That seems like a long time, but maybe there was a reason for that. Oh, no, Luong, right? Or Kezia.
Yeah, subcommittee members, if anyone wants to speak to that point.
I mean, I'm having trouble recalling exactly that timeline. I think that we talked about something that was less and arrived at, I think, 5 to 7 because of the potential, I think, for influence, but I didn't take notes, so I'm actually having trouble recalling that. And I'm not sure if Long can flesh that out for me.
I think I remember the conversation just slightly. I think we were on less. I think we were at 2, but then we thought 2 was too relevant. And then we said something like at 5 to 7, you're already on the way out, I think is how the conversation went. And I think this was 2 committee meetings ago. But
Yeah, so
I can't remember the exact reasoning behind that.
yeah, so I think you're right. So 5 to 7 years would establish that a person is removed enough from the county and the county campaign world maybe to be able to be more objective on this oversight commission. That's what the thinking was behind 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, I don't know if the county has a restriction on former staff lobbying. I know the city has a depending who you are, a 1 or 2 year exclusion on lobbying at the city. That seems to be much closer.
I think, oh, sorry. I can raise my hand.
That's okay.
I'm like hitting a bunch of buttons. I feel like I feel fine with the number, but I do feel like people who ran under having a system where this commission before changing rules or changing some of the scope of it actually talks to people who did run under the program and does interviews with people who did run under the program to get their feedback. I actually think is very helpful. So even if they're not serving on the commission, if there is a feedback loop provided by people who were participants, I think that's an important piece. So 5 to 7 seems fine with me. I feel like maybe it's under the adding some pieces about the role of what they're required to do.
Okay. James?
At the risk of just being like a Felisa +1 today or whatever, I do think, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, I think by 5 years of not being any of those things, a county staff, somebody who's, worked on the campaigns, like, I mean, I do think we've done a pretty good job kind of insulating it from political influence. So I think 5 years of being a former staff, I do think we have to dial in on what we mean by direct staff, because I don't know if that's rigorously defined in the at the county. But so I think probably that 5 years there is fine. I do think that other part of what Felisa raised, I think Kezia and Lung and Roxy did a great job on like who can serve and how and when do they serve. But I do think we should have something in the recommendations about the oversight that encourages a process. I think kind of like what the city of Portland does, getting feedback from participants, donors, candidates, et cetera, annually, and using that as part of the oversight process feels important to like capture and make a recommendation around.
Okay, great. I have a note out there. I'm going to fill out that link. I can fill out the language later, but I have that. I think the essence distilled there. Moving on to a third part of this piece. And I want to make sure we also have time to talk about the other topics too. Is the administrative rulemaking. This is very critical. So, the Portland Elections Commission has administrative rulemaking authority. And that means it has the ability to pass rules that, that everyone has to follow. It's different from the authority that the city council has. So city council gets like define kind of broad features of the program. And, they'll be like, here's what the contribution limit is, and here are the matching funds candidates can receive. Administrative rulemaking is more narrow. It's like, here are the definitions, for what it means. Like, here's how we define fair market value, for instance, and here's how we establish what, treasurers have to report. So not all of that needs to be inscribed in the county law. And that's what administrative rulemaking is for. It allows for more clarity from the program, but not having to put everything in the city and the county code. And it allowed, giving the Oversight Commission some rulemaking authority allows for that division of power. So the county board has a very clear role in this. And the recommendations you're giving today are for the county board. But a division of power also allows for the Oversight Commission to step in and make critical rule changes at different points throughout the whole election cycle. Finally, administrative rulemaking gives the program more flexibility, because sometimes the board can't get to a major topic for sometimes if there's a quick fix needed, but the Oversight Commission can. And so there are plenty of times in Portland Elections Commission when they would receive a piece of feedback that there was some unintended consequence for the law or for the rules, and then at their next monthly meeting, they could fix it really quickly and allow the program to operate smoothly. And so that's the benefit of making sure Oversight Commission has administrative rulemaking authority. And these are the rules themselves. If you look under, I think the oversight fact sheet has like a table that breaks it down. But the administrative rulemaking, I'll just run through it real quickly. Would adjust match caps in the event of underfunding. And then establish definitions around allowable in-kind donations. I think most of those will probably be covered actually like by the recommendation on in-kind donations that the ASO committee's made. And I'm just going to get through this list real quickly before taking questions. Establish practices around receiving complaints, the program timelines, when can candidates for supply, when do they need to qualify by, etc. Further define prohibited sources of contributions or services that the campaign can pay for. Establish reporting requirements. Any rules for candidates switching races. Set the criteria, determine if investigations are needed in the manner of the investigation. So the Oversight Commission is not doing the investigation, it's determining the manner and the criteria of the investigation. Determine penalties and establish the policies around the size of penalties. Using the contributions and matching funds, like what can they be used for? And then rules around paying fair market value. It also would be empowered to make like recommendations around funding and rule changes or law changes, and consult on hiring, firing decisions for the program manager. And you'll also be able to like review the program's performance. So that's the list of the administrative rules that the Oversight Commission would have. Reactions? Yeah, Corey.
This all looks great to me. I think you guys did a great job. I'm inclined to just say thumbs up and move on, unless there's some item here that you thought was particularly controversial or you wanted additional feedback on or wanted to find too from the members of the subcommittee.
Most of this was actually based on the city law, to be honest. So there wasn't that much that was controversial here.
And I think we're good.
Okay.
Others? Yes, James. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, team.
Yeah, great job, subcommittee. So then the entire oversight, before you all, if you all feel comfortable voting, before you all vote, it would be what you see here on the screen on the IAC and subcommittee recommendations, document, but there'd be some changes. So you could say the motion, I promote a motion to make this recommendation with the following, with the changes in mind. And the changes would be number one, the oversight body should be required to meet with the Portland Elections Commission to discuss opportunities for overlap and standardization. The Board of County Commissioners would pick 5 members of the Oversight Commission, and then those 5 members would nominate the remaining 4 to be voted on by the Board of County Commissioners. So the Board of County Commissioners gets to nominate the initial 5 themselves, but they cannot nominate if they are up for election that year. And it creates a staggered series of terms. James, go ahead.
And as a process thing, could we remove the stuff that we've talked about, that we're talking about changing, and then just make a motion to adopt everything else, and that you'll come back to us with the language for, like, I don't want to vote on, oh, Daniel, please go change these things. Like, I want to see what you change, and then just make sure that looks kind of the way that, and that I don't think of anything else that like feels weird about it. What do other people think about just voting on the stuff that we all agree on and excluding the stuff that Daniel's going to do some research on?
Or write, just write. Not necessarily research, it's actually just writing the text.
Right, except for there's one to research with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, but yeah, the rest of them are mainly just write out like what the new language is.
Yeah, and I'm happy to bring it back to another point. It's always helpful to have votes sooner than later, so that way we can just like make sure we're on track. I think I would write it out exactly as like you see here. I mean, I would like fill it in to like be more formal, but it would still capture the core. But if people would rather see the full written language before voting, that's also fine. Yeah, Felisa.
I would. I feel like I would rather just have you rewrite it and then we vote when it's all finished and done.
Okay. All right, we can do that later then. All
Thank you.
right, well, then I will rewrite that. Moving on, I think we're gonna actually hold off on in-kind donations unless, you know, the issue was that there was one item that the subcommittee did not reach consensus on, and it was decided to bring that to that debate to the full IAC. And so I want to be able to hold that full debate with you all. But one of the members, Becca, isn't here. And then Felicia, I also, you know, I don't want to make you talk a lot. So are people okay with me putting in-kind donation on the next agenda, and then we can maybe do expenditure limits on this agenda?
Could you maybe just tell us what the question was so we can be thinking about it?
Yeah, totally. So if you I think it's probably listed here. Yeah, if you go up to the part of the document that says in-kind donations, on the very bottom it says subcommittee members did not reach the consensus on the following. Membership organizations can give up to 12 months full-time staff equivalents to candidates for county office. That is similar to language from the state. That's how much organizations can donate, is up to 12-month full-time staff equivalents. And there was you know, disagreement on the subcommittee about whether 12 months was too, you know, I think like whether or not that would be too large of a limit. Because then, like, you know, if a staff member was paid $100,000 as 12-month equivalent, then the in-kind donation would be $100,000, which is quite large. So, you know, there was a question about is it possible like lower that limit? And you could lower it by like putting a restriction in place on how high those donations can be, or on like lessening the number of months. So it's not 12 months full-time staff equivalent, it's like 6 months. So that's just trying to distill the discussion down for you all to consider later. Let's talk about expenditure limits. I don't think this hopefully won't take that long. So when I didn't do a video on this, but I think I can explain it pretty quickly. So when most matching programs have restrictions on how the candidates can spend matching funds, because they are taxpayer dollars. And so you want to avoid situations where taxpayer dollars are going to like enrich a candidate personally, or, you know, spend in a way that like violates the principles of the program. So a lot of programs have restrictions on matching dollars, and this is what expenditure limits, and that's what we mean by expenditure limits. It should be noted that campaigns can still spend the private money they raise on those items if they wish. So like if they've raised $1,000 from individuals, they could spend that $1,000 on some of these items, but they just can't spend the matching funds on these items too. So this is a list of the subcommittee, and it was Kari Marshall who went through. I'll run through the list real quickly, but this is mostly based on like what Portland has too. So you cannot use matching funds to purchase any item or service prohibited under state law. You can't give it to another candidate campaign, PAC, or ballot measure campaign, because the matching funds are meant for you if you're running for office. You can't make an independent expenditure to support or oppose a candidate from a different race or ballot measure, because again, the matching funds were given to you to advocate for your candidacy. Support candidates' attempts to seek a nomination for another office. Use to pay loans, debts, penalties, or fines in excess of $5,000. Pay a consultant unless they are providing a bona fide service, charge a fair market value. This is kind of wonky, this language from the city, and it makes sense why. Pay for travel outside counties adjacent to the Tri-County area. So that allows you to travel to, like, if you have a campaign fundraiser in Beaverton or Clark County, you can by all means use your matching funds to go to that, because that is legitimate campaigning, but you can't use the matching funds to go like to Hawaii. So that's the intention behind that one. Pay for attorney or accounting fees in association with appealing a penalty issued by the public campaign financing program. So again, you can use your private funds for that, but the matching funds are not meant for you to avoid penalties. They're meant for you to advocate for your campaign. Pay a salary or an unreimbursed payment to a family member. Purchase gifts other than items of de minimis value, make payments in cash or with gift cards, because those are, really challenging to track. Donate to nonprofits unless specific circumstances such as attending a reasonably priced event for campaign purposes. So you can totally use the matching funds to go to like a fundraiser or a gala. You just can't like donate it to another nonprofit, for any other reason. Let's see. Purchase any vehicle related expenses unless that expense is for costs associated with reimbursed mileage, parking, rideshare, and transit. So you cannot buy a car with the matching funds. Let's see. Pay for any costs associated with conducting a recount. Pay a post-election bonus to a staff member or a campaign consultant unless that bonus was agreed to in writing before the election. We do like people should be paid for their work, and bonuses are part of that. But we don't want, after the election, candidates start like giving away matching funds in large amounts instead of returning it to the program. And so pay costs associated with challenging another candidate's ability to qualify for the ballot or qualify for matching funds. The purpose of the program is to support competitive elections and to allow different voices. So you can't use matching funds to prevent that from happening. Let's see. Pay costs associated with carrying out the official duties of an elected official. Pay for, and that is actually borrowed from, I think, New York City. Pay for an item or service from a provider where the candidate is employed or has ownership stake in the case of a privately held company. So you can't use matching funds to, essentially route the money back to your pocket if you're the candidate. Pay to rent office space that the candidate owns or the candidate is employed or has ownership interest in a privately held company. And we didn't talk about this before in the subcommittee, but most other programs require that unused matching funds be returned to the program after the election cycle. So if you have like $10,000 left over, you have to give it back. So those are the list. And then there's also one other that's private. So that means the individual donations they raise or matching funds cannot be used to pay rent for an office space in the candidate's home. So again, you can't route that back to you. Kari, do you want to, since you're on the subcommittee, do you want to add anything to the thinking behind this?
Yeah. As much as possible, we matched Portland.
Yes.
We thought Portland fell short, and so we added those in. And again, to just reemphasize, this is about the matching funds, not the private funds. If you want to use your privately raised money to go to Hawaii because there's a fundraiser there, great, but not the taxpayer funds. I think, Daniel, I think there are two places I just noticed where I think we missed something. I want you to just toss them in there if you don't mind.
Okay.
The fourth bullet, support the candidate's attempt to seek nomination or election to another office. Those are two different things.
Oh, yeah.
Primary elections in general.
I guess if you're going to do that, include appointment.
I suppose, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Sure. And then the list of counties. The idea was, of course, you can be in Multnomah County. Of course, you can be in Multnomah and Washington, Clackamas. And then it's the ring of counties around that. Those are good. It's beyond that, right? Boise, Idaho is out. Seattle is out. Honolulu is out. But Vancouver and Salem are fine. I do think, Daniel, we forgot to include Washington and Clackamas explicitly.
Oh, I meant adjacent to the Tri-County area.
I think let's just make sure we say Washington and Clackamas. And I suppose Multnomah.
Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas. Okay.
And then the very last bullet, private or matching funds are based on personal residence. I think actually the private part there is handled by state law, which prohibits using campaign funds for personal purposes. There's a whole range of things you can't use personal campaign funds for at all. You can't buy yourself clothes, you can't buy yourself groceries, you can't, So I think that's covered by all that state law stuff.
Well, I actually did check in with the state about that one, and unbelievably enough, you can use private funds to rent an office in your own home.
Okay, then.
Yeah. So, okay.
But
Felisa.
in the interest of
Sorry, Kari.
syncing up with state law, maybe we ought to again continue to allow that with private funds, not matching funds.
Okay.
That'd be. Those are what I hope are all friendly amendments to this thing.
And sorry, for clarity, you say you want to from bullet number 2, we're just removing private fencing. Matching funds cannot be used to pay for rent. Okay, gotcha. Felisa.
Can we just do a mileage instead of listing out all of the counties?
Oh, like within 100 miles of Multnomah County?
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Easy enough.
Do people like that, or do people want it like listed out?
Because I don't really care if you go to Clatsop County to do a fundraiser.
I guess is it like 100 miles from like the border of Multnomah County? So, or like a specific point in Multnomah County?
From the nose of the Portlandia statue.
Okay. Felisa, your hand's still raised. James, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess overall, I think this looks really good. I wondered, Kari, could you talk about the matching funds being used to pay loans, debts, penalties, or fines below $5,000? Why are we not just disallowing matching funds to be used to pay those things?
I don't remember why we set that number. Daniel?
Yeah, so the city has that language because it allows for like if you have a campaign credit card, I think, is that included in debt, and should you be able to pay that off with your matching funds? I mean, like, the debt is for campaign incurred expenses. So that was like why the city has that language. And the same with loans too, like technically, credit cards a loan.
Oh, interesting. Well, I assume actually the penalties or fines then in the city is thinking of like, oh, if you have a credit card charge that you're late on, that they want to let you use the matching funds to pay for that. I don't know. I mean, this seems really broad. Loans, debts, penalties, or fines, which feels like it could be. I mean, I don't know, like maybe some things like traffic tickets or something are included under one of the other bullets, but like there's going to be a lot of things that are penalties, fines, debts that are going to be less than $5,000 that don't feel like good use of public like matching funds.
Well, again, you wouldn't be able to do it if it's a personal expense that's already prohibited under state law. We're talking about penalties or fines that the campaign has accrued. I don't know if you rent a space in a city park and you overstay your permit, is there a fine? Probably. Campaign funds
That
for that?
kind of thing.
How do other folks feel about this bullet point?
It makes sense to me as written. I get, James, your concern around it. I feel like having the state law that protects it from being used for personal benefit is enough protections where I feel comfortable like moving forward with it.
And Daniel, you said that the city. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
I just want it to match the cities.
And Daniel, you said this is in the city of Portland, and there's not really been issue with this like part being abused.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems weird to me, but if that's the sense of the group and it hasn't been a problem in Portland, then I guess I'm fine with it.
What about this other language I highlighted here? This was not something the subcommittee voted on, but I realized that it should be included in the law. Probably is unused matching funds must be returned to the program after the election cycle has concluded. The city of Portland has that. It has like by, a month after or however many 45 days after the election. If you have any funds left over, you just have to return them back to the program.
Yeah, as long as there's that window to pay invoices that come in late.
Yeah. And we can like define that more in administrative code. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. So it's your call. We can either vote on this. Well, so the only change requested, it looks like, is the one that that is still ill-defined. The only thing that's still ill-defined is pay for travel outside counties adjacent to Tri-County area. We listed the counties out, but Felisa suggested we just use like a specific number, like 100 miles. And I can like come back with language around that. So it's your call. Do you all either want to vote on this, and I will just bring that language back to you as like a loose thread to wrap up later about that one piece, or B, do you want to wait on voting on the whole thing until I have that language, that bullet point edited?
I'm fine
personally
with Yeah, I'm fine with voting on this. I did also, in reading that, I don't know, Felisa, I'm wondering how strongly you feel about that 100 miles, because or whatever the number is, because I do think it's going to beg a whole bunch of questions from campaigns who are like, I'm sorry, is that 100 miles as the crow flies? Is that driving miles? Is it from the center of the county? Is it from the edge of the county? Where it feels like, even though I agree, like, the counties are weirdly shaped, and that's going to be like slightly like not representative for everything, but also at least it's clear at the front end, like you have to be in one of these counties if you're throwing your fundraiser, which does feel like a benefit over all the like questions that are going to be begged by putting a number there.
I don't feel super strongly. I feel like it just is, to me, the mileage is easier than the like, can I go to this county or that county or this county? But I don't really care.
And of course, you can still use your private funds to hold a fundraiser, if you want to go out to Classhopper Lane or wherever.
Yeah, I'm persuaded by James. We should just stick to the counties because it's really clear where you are and aren't. I mean, I hate to have somebody think, well, geez, by the strict reading of this rule, if I drive over 110 miles all inside Multnomah County, I've now violated a rule. Right? Like you could read it 1,000 ways. I'd just go to the counties.
Okay. Are folks ready to hold a vote? Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I'll move to adopt these as written with the changes added.
Okay. So I'm just going to order. Remember to say it does. Just remember to speak your vote. Lung.
Yes.
Kezia.
Aye.
Oops. James.
Aye.
Kari.
Aye.
Beth.
Aye.
Felisa.
I
Great. Thank you all. Okay. Let's close out by talking about violations. We actually talked about this last week, but we're revisiting it because there's like one piece that I think folks want a little more time on. And I wish Terrence was here because he was the main advocate for this piece, but I can try to do justice to it. So if you scroll down to the part that is the violations piece, which is I think the final, page 10 of 10, violations and penalties. And there's a fact sheet according to it. I sent the video out explaining it. So the things to emphasize here is number one, the goal is not to inscribe all of the potential penalties in the law, because that is something for administrative rulemaking. That's something that administrative rulemaking could take care of if you all desired it. So that's why you don't see anything here about like this specific violation is going to incur this specific penalty. It's much more like these are the broad principles and these are like the steps we take. And these are the values we bring into it. So I think and then the goal part is critical. And I'm going to just like cover this, and then Beth, I'm going to ask you if you want to share anything about it. But it's important that the program have the ability to exact penalties. There are people who violate the rules on purpose, and that they need to be held accountable. But the purpose of the program is not really to punish candidates. Vast majority of violations happen by accident, and that we saw that in Portland all the time. Like, candidate would take a donation that's too large for them to take, or they would forget to report like one donation, and or they would like spend money in a way that they're not supposed to spend. But those were mostly done by accident. And when the program reached out to them and said, "Hey, look, we caught this," almost every instance the campaigns would just fix it real quickly and then move on. And so that's why penalties are important, but we don't want to over penalize people or campaigns, because then we're penalizing them for an accident. Campaigns are spending most of their time fighting these instead of actually campaigning and engaging people. It's going to definitely hurt grassroots candidates and candidates from underrepresented communities who can't afford legal counsel. And then it, I think, obscures the public narrative. The public narrative should really be focused on like, this is broadening our democracy, not this is a way of punishing candidates. So that was the thinking behind this. We want to allow for like lots of space for communication and dialogue with the campaigns, and allow for like education and chances to fix the programs, not like over penalizing for every mistake made. With that said, Beth, is there anything you wanted to add about like the intention behind here?
I think the only other thing I'd add is we did try to keep it close, if not the exact same as Portland's, just for ease of it all. And Portland's recommendation does do a really good job at highlighting cure periods and communication and all that. So yeah, that was really just our intent going into it. But other than that, I think you covered it, Daniel.
Okay. Real quickly, I'm gonna just cover the steps and like the specifics of the recommendation. So if there's a violation, the program staff would contact the campaign or the treasurer and request more information, ask for clarifying details, and suggest that the campaign cure or fix the violation within the cure period. And I'll talk about cure period in a second. Step 2. If the program staff still believes the violation occurred and was not fixed immediately, then it would again connect with the campaign and ask them to fix it before the cure period has expired. Or if it's a bigger deal, the program might have to like tell the campaign it's launching an investigation. Step 3 is if the potential violation was not addressed and fixed within the cure period, the program office has to initiate an investigation. It'll assess a penalty based on the investigation's findings, and then issue the penalty decision to the campaign committee. And then, the campaign committee may pay the penalty. It can file a request for reconsideration, which I'll talk about in a minute. And they can also appeal the penalty through a legal process. And this is very similar to Portland's process too. And so the things to define is, number 1, the only official complaint that the program will accept will be made by other campaigns. So members of the public can still send in tips, and we can still accept violation flags from the elections office or from others, but the only complaints we'll actually consider are from the other campaigns, and that's an attempt to reduce spurious complaints. Because when you don't have, I think the city of Portland learned this, when you don't have this in place, the campaigns just get all their allies to submit as many complaints as possible. And even if they're like spurious, even if like they're easily dismissed, even if they've already been fixed, the campaigns will still have their allies do that. So then they can file a press release saying, their opponent has a complaint lodged against them. And so the idea is, if you have a complaint, then the campaigns have to actually stand by it. And it reduces the desire to like weaponize the complaint process. Felisa.
I'm unclear if that, because I think it's parties that are harmed. So I feel like, have you run that by the city attorney or the county attorney's office?
Not yet.
Okay, because I actually think, I mean, love it in theory, but I feel like I'm not sure that that's actually that you can actually do that.
Okay. Let me just take that out. The county attorney's office has asked that we have, like, when we have specific language, we run it by them. So that's why, like, after recommendations are made, I'm gonna. I mean, I've been talking to them about other things throughout, and I'll give you those updates as they come along. But it's best to have the specific language. So I'm gonna move this over here and say
Who would be a person that would be harmed if it's not an opposing campaign by a campaign violation?
At the Secretary of State is if it's members of the public who are harmed. That's why members of the public under state law can file campaign finance violation complaints because you're an electorate in the state of Oregon. So I actually don't think you can limit it because of if you're an electorate in Multnomah County, then you can be subject to harm.
Okay, I will check on that one. Other things to point out is the cure period. That's just the amount of time that campaigns can fix an issue without having to incur a penalty. And this is something that is in the Portland rules, and I think also in the Multnomah County election rules too. For the elections division. And what that says is that as long as you fix it within a specific time span, there's no penalty. And so what the subcommittee recommended was that be the same timeline as the reporting period. So, if you have, it's 30, in this case, actually it's 30 days from the incident. And 30 days from when you are notified about the incident. And then once it's closer to the election, 7 days from when you're notified about the incident. So that is the idea behind the cure period. I saw a bunch of hands go up. So I think, James, you were first.
So thanks for drafting this, and thanks for the conversation that we had last time about this. I think this is close, and the way you just described it, I think is what I want and what I would vote for, but I think the language needs a little bit of tweaking. It feels like what we're saying is at the time that the campaign is notified, whatever the reporting timeline for regular transactions is at that point, that is their cure period starting on the day they were notified. And that sounds good to me. I don't think that the language as written means exactly that or captures exactly that, but I feel like that's what we discussed, and that is, I'm in support of that.
I believe that was the intent. Felisa? Maybe your hand was raised by mistake.
My hand was raised by mistake.
Okay. Beth?
Just to James's point of what part of what's written doesn't communicate that?
Well, what I feel like is ambiguous. So the cure period is defined to be the same timeline as the reporting timeline, meaning 30 days from the incident and then 7 days if the incident occurred within 42 days before the election. So I'm picturing like a very frequent thing that will happen is the incident occurred months ago when the reporting timeline was 30 days, but it's only being reported now, months later, and the reporting timeline is 7 days. And the language as written, I think, says, oh, the incident happened during the 30-day reporting period. Like, you have 30 days. But really, it's like at the time that you're notified, whatever the appropriate timeline would be for a like new transaction, then like that's the timeline you should have.
Yeah, cool. Because then the next sentence under there is the cure period starts when the campaign is notified. Does that maybe I'm just misunderstanding what you're saying, but that doesn't.
I love that part. The part that I think is ambiguous is the very first part.
Okay, the first. So even if we just got rid of like that first, the cure period is fine to be the same timeline as the reporting timeline.
I think that's, well, sorry, we have to say what the cure period
Yeah.
is. But yes, I think it's the part that I think is ambiguous
Yeah.
is the cure period is defined to be the same timeline as the reporting timeline, because now we have two events going on: the incident that actually happened and the notification.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Sorry, it just took me a second to.
Why don't I just get rid of that first section? So the cure period is meaning 30 days from notification of the incident. 30 days from notification of the incident, and then 7 days if that occurred within 42 days of the election. The cure period starts when the campaign is notified. Do you feel like that sufficiently captures it?
I think you need to, so that part I think now is good, but I think you need to change the second, then 7 days if the notification occurred within 42 days of the election, right? Like we're trying to tie the cure period to the notification, not to the incident.
Okay, gotcha. Felisa.
Who wasn't here last week? Is there a reason why we just don't give the cure period 7 days?
If we don't just say the cure period is 7 days for the entire cycle?
Yeah, like when you're notified, you have 7 days to cure.
I think it was like the reason the city has the 30 days at first is because it sometimes might take longer to cure. So for instance, if you have to refund the donation and from a donation too large and you're not quite clear who the donor was, then you might have to like go back significantly. You might have to spend some time establishing that, or if you have to like make a correction to a reporting period and you have to kind of go through and figure out what the correction was. And maybe like you didn't record everything accurately, so you need to go back and do it. Obviously that's like something you shouldn't do, but and hopefully it'll take most campaigns not that long to fix it, but it just gives them a little bit more grace to actually fix it.
Gotcha. Unless you're in the 42 days before the election, then you don't have that no matter what. So
Are you asking specifically that we do change it to 7 days all the way through?
I have no strong opinions. So I think it's fine the way it is. But
Okay. I can move on unless there are other thoughts on this cure period definition. Okay. Point number 2, I already talked about this, but the exact penalty amounts are going to be hopefully established in administrative rulemaking. And then this one's the one actually that sparked a lot of conversation, and so I'll run through it again. The campaign matching funds cannot be used to pay a campaign consultant or contractor if the consultant or contractor had obtained more than 5 uncured violations within the last 3 election cycles. It's uncured violations. This rule only applies to the election cycle following the one where the 5th uncured violation occurred. So I wish Terrence was here to kind of discuss it in greater detail, because this was his proposal. But what he was talking about was, I think he was worried about unscrupulous consultants who maybe either directly violate the law or get the campaign into trouble and violate the law. And so the idea here is, well, if that's the case, then matching funds cannot be used to pay them in a future election cycle. Obviously they would have to have like a certain minimum number of violations, and they would have to be uncured, as in like the consultant refused to pay them. But that was like the thinking behind this rule. I think I saw Felisa and then James.
I don't understand how a consultant has violations. Like, I understand how a campaign has violations, and I understand how you may have hired a campaign finance tracking firm that may have, contribute to your tracking problems that cause you violations. But the consultant itself, I don't understand how they would ever have a violation.
Yeah, really good question. So we talked about this in the subcommittee meeting. In the 5 years working for the city of Portland, there was actually never a violation levied against a consultant. They were always against the campaigns themselves. But there were no rules in the city around violations by consultants. And so I think one of the other things at hand here was,
Can you tell me how a consultant, can you just back up? How would a consultant have a campaign finance violation? They don't have a PAC. They don't spend the money. They don't direct a PAC. They may have done a late filing, but that's on your campaign to do. So like, I get it. We have somebody who manages our PAC, and sometimes they have fines that are our fines because they manage our PAC. But that's between us and our contract with that consultant. That's not the fine never goes to the consultant. So how
Yeah.
would they have a violation?
And so what we talked about in the subcommittee meeting was there's nothing in the recommendations about consultants, but if a rule was passed at a later date that did address consultants directly, this would be the frame or structure for holding them accountable, is the thinking behind why this was here. I think James.
I mean, my main thing was the same as Felisa. Like, I don't understand how a consultant is getting a violation. But I will say, I mean, especially with that last comment of, oh, well, in the future, the program might decide to adopt something. I mean, on that tip, I would say, okay, well, then we should adopt something at the time. But even without, if we're not specifying something to kind of later be used, I will say, including this, which I like the concept. I wish Terrence was here to kind of flesh it out. Like, I do feel like in concept, this could be good. There's a way to kind of become ineligible as a vendor for public, dollars if you're not, scrupulous or whatever. Okay, that makes sense to me. But today we don't even track if which campaigns a vendor is using. So how would you even, if you're trying to comply with this, how would you even know if you could spend the campaign contributions with said vendor? Because where would you even see if they were eligible?
Yeah, so I mean, the program would have to develop a procedure around this. What I imagine is, of course, like whenever the expenditure reports are filed, it says where the campaign is sending money to, and so we have that track of like what vendors getting paid, and then like if there was an incident at this point, I don't want to jump the gun here because there'd be more thought necessary for such a procedure, but maybe like the program would put on this website, these are the potential, like, these are consulting firms or contractors or vendors who've like violated the rules. And so, you have to use private funds if you want to pay them. I think I saw Beth and then Kari.
Yeah, like folks have said, I do wish Terrence was here because he was the primary advocate around this particular issue, or I should say recommendation rather. That being said, I agree wholeheartedly with what James just said around if this isn't applicable now, then I don't know why we would necessarily want to include it in our recommendation. Meaning if there isn't any way currently for campaign consultants or contractors to be charged with violations, and there shouldn't, like, why there's that's like a later issue for the folks in the oversight committee later on, I would say. So I feel like now that like it's been, I don't know, a couple weeks since we've talked about this, like I personally am comfortable with getting rid of this portion of the recommendation. But obviously happy to keep having more conversation around it.
Kari.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'm beating this particular dead horse, but if we're talking about consulting firms, well, LLCs are easy to create new ones. So if you're trying to like chase around, it's easy to get around it. And frankly, if the problem is with a particular individual, there are employees of consulting firms and vendors. Maybe there's an employee who's a bad apple and they're just moving from company to company. That's supposed to be penalized. So all of this seems like a solution in search of a problem. It's hard to figure. I think maybe at most I'd want to go is, again, referring back to state law. There are felonies in state law, state election law, and maybe might say if somebody's been convicted of a felony under the election law, just election law, not other felonies, then they don't get the right to be used to be hired here within a certain number of years, say. But even then, like, I don't know who's going to hire somebody with an election law felony. I'm just not worried about it, and I don't know what we're talking about here. Again, particularly that consultants and vendors don't accrue violations.
Okay. Felicia, your hand's still up.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think we should remove this. I feel like unless you're gonna have a whole like vendor certification program, which, you know, I definitely support because I think that there's a lot of unscrupulous vendors out there for lots of reasons. And most of them don't commit election violations. It's more a malpractice issue.
They're skeezy for other reasons. Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have an issue with me removing it? Okay, great. I will do that. Okay. So on this one, violations and penalties, the main edit I have is, you know, the whole part about like can campaigns be the only ones who file a complaint? I'll run that by through our legal team and get their analysis on that part. But everything else here, are there any other final edits or concerns that people have about this policy? Okay. Do you all feel comfortable with it, or do you want me to like wait and come back later with that one bullet point?
I think you could include the only campaigns can file complaints rule, and then if you come back and tell us, hey, legal says no way, we'll vote to strip it.
Oh, okay.
That sound good to folks?
Okay. So I'll still like check in with legal about it, but we might include in a recommendation today. Gotcha. Are you all ready to vote?
I don't. I would prefer to come back with the answer actually, because I actually am not ready to say that only campaigns can file complaints on campaign finance violations.
Okay.
I feel fine with the rest of it.
So I have like a kind of a document of like loose threads, which is like other things that have been asked. But that way you can like put them aside and investigate them more, you know, on your request. But allow the like the main policies to still get voted on, or the bulk of the policies to get voted on. So do you all mind if we vote on the violations and penalties with that third point about the who can file complaints? We can like, I can come back to you all with that one. We can talk about that in greater depth.
Okay, so we're going to pull that one and vote on the rest of it.
Yeah. If that's okay with folks. Okay. Do we have a motion to vote on the language?
So moved.
All right. Lung?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. Kezia?
Aye.
James?
Yes.
Oops, spelled her name wrong. Kari?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
And Felisa?
I
Okay. Thank you all so much. That's very productive. So we got 2 policies knocked out. And then one of them is like, oh, you know, bring you the updated language around the Oversight Commission. Next week is the same time, Friday, 3 p.m. And we'll be talking about in-kind contributions and contribution limits. So we'll be able to get into that at that point. And if we have extra time, we can like maybe go back on like, you know, and do the oversight language one again too. Any other thoughts or concerns before we adjourn? Okay. Thank you all so much for your time. Where actually the light at the end of the tunnel is really close, and so we're almost there. But really appreciate your patience and your dedication.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone. Have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.